Ensign Williams' striking style is heavily influenced by geometric constructivism. Lieutenant Wright has effectively fused the incongruities of the surrealists with the irrationality of Dadaism, and Data finds Picard's painting interesting. Hello, everybody, and welcome to The Seventh Rule with Cirroc Lofton, who's also very interesting.
That was excellent job, Ryan. Good job.
Thank you. My name is Ryan T. Husk, and today we're doing a review of Star Trek The Next Generation, Season 3, Episode 14, A Matter of Perspective, written by Ed Zuckerman. Isn't that like a 90210 character? Andrea Zuckerman. Directed by Cliff Bole. Everybody knows and loves Cliff Bole. This was February 10th, 1990. Where were you? And how are you today, Cirroc Lofton?
I'm doing great. It's Cargo Bay Cliff Bowl. That was the new nickname for him. But no, when did this episode come out?
February 10th, 1990.
Yeah. Okay. I'm doing great. I'm doing great.
Mm-hmm. So Cliff Bole, we know and we love him. He's cool. He's great. Ed Zuckerman. I clicked on him right before we were going to record just to kind of look around and poke around if he'd done anything before. Because when I first watched this episode just now, I was thinking this has a similar feel to a Melinda Snodgrass episode. You know, a little more techie than she likes to go. She likes to go more into legalities. This one, it was kind of a fusion of techie talky stuff that was tough for my brain to capture. I'm like, is this a converter? Is it a generator? I don't even know what we're talking about. But then also fused in with like the courtroom and psychological stuff. And everybody at home,
Yeah.
please make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel. If you're listening in, please leave us a 5-star rating and a nice review. We'd really appreciate it. So what do you think of this courtroom stuff, Cirroc?
Well, I will say that if if Melinda Snodgrass were to write this episode, I think she would have a different twist on
Mm-hmm.
her perspective, because a lot of the things that she does, even though she does have that court background, is thematically, she takes certain principles and makes those the heart of the show, like we saw with that episode she did, A Measure of a Man. Is that with
Yeah,
Data?
right, right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so what she did with that episode was take the principle of human rights and attribute it to whether Data is qualified to have these kind of human rights that, are granted to everybody. And does the fact that he's an android exempt him from certain kind of uh, privileges that are extended as human right privileges? So um, I think that this episode was lacking that kind of moral compass to guide it. And if it had grounded itself in some level of morality, where as the audience I'm fighting whether I'm on one side of the thing or the other, then it would make me kind of question some aspect of whatever legality that they were trying to raise in this particular instance. For example, they could have talked about Starfleet rights versus the rights of this planet. And that could have been a central theme. Like, well, in our, we have extradition rights, we have the right
Right.
to interrogate, we have the right to, and Starfleet saying, well, no, because you saw that Picard took the position that no, you're not gonna extradite him to wherever you want to go, or you're not going to interrogate him to wherever you want to interrogate him. You're going to do it here. We're going to have it. So they touched and brushed upon um, who has the legal authority to conduct and what it is that needs to be done and how it was going to proceed. But that could have been a point of contention right there. It could have been something that we, discuss. Could have been something that's argued between Starfleet's, higher ups and this planet's delegates and representatives. So that could have been more of a central theme in this episode.
I completely agree with that. Um, and not just because you said something very eloquent and I want to jump on the bandwagon, but that's mostly it. Is that no, I totally agree that Melinda Snodgrass, she's examining humanity. She's examining, the theme of the episode is the rights of the individual or psychology of humanity. There's this kind of human play. Whereas this episode touched on it. It touched on Riker's rights. It touched on the rights of the Federation versus the rights or of Starfleet versus the rights of the planet they're visiting. It touched on those things. It covered them. I found those to be very interesting, but then it moved on. That was not the theme. If Melinda had written this, that would be the theme. It would be the theme of Riker's rights, even though, it would be about his rights on a different planet. Do we follow the rights that are laid upon him from Starfleet or in the planet, whatever. But this one was much more of focusing on just the mystery. This was a mystery episode. And it was actually real quick. This is what it made me think of. A Matter of Perspective made me think of this cool graphic. I'll pull it up right now. What you have is a number on the ground and two dorks pointing at it. One of them is standing on one side and says, "That's a 9." And the other one is standing on the other side saying, "That's a 6." And that is a matter of perspective, right? He's not lying. He's not wrong. He's not lying. He's not wrong. But they are seeing two different things based on their perspective. And I think it's a perfect illustration for humans and a lot of things. And it was certainly the case with this episode, because in Riker's memory, he's like, "Hey, bro, no, man, she came on to me. I was like, no way. I respect you and the doctor too much. Please put your clothing back on. What are you doing?" Like, he was just like,
yeah, right.
or what a poor guy. She was all over him. And he was like, "No way. My heart belongs to Deanna Troi and you're married. I would never." And then in her memory, she's like, "This lech was groping me and he was all over me." And then the assistant was like, "And then my boss knocked him out with a right hook." It was killing me, man. But that's the matter of perspective, I guess.
Yeah, and so for that reason, it was very, on the surface what it was. It wasn't There wasn't much of a mystery there for me in watching this episode. You know, I thought this would be a perfect opportunity to have a good use of Counselor Troi. I was like, yes, finally,
Totally.
Counselor. I was like, Troy.
But then what a cop out. She's like, everybody's telling the truth. They just have a different perspective. Then why do we have you here? You're literally right here in a courtroom and you're like, everybody's telling the truth. I mean, obviously it does work out that they were all kind of telling the truth for the most part, but she could have at least added, like, she's telling the truth, but she's unsure about what she says, or she does have some hesitation, or Riker's telling the truth.
She's protecting her feelings. She's embellishing something that we can, as the audience, can obviously tell that she's embellishing, that they're both embellishing, and there would be some tell like, I don't believe she's being 100% truthful, Captain. Some cue, but she's being almost useless as the rest of the story. And I was rubbing my hands thinking, oh, this is it. This is where Troi uses her
moment to shine. It's a Troi episode. Here we go, Troi, go get him. And she goes, both sides are telling the truth. Da 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 da. Hey.
Yeah. So it was, I don't know, it was in that way, it was really it was just lackluster for like an interesting plot line for me. I didn't expect it. So I had to find other things to keep me entertained. And those things were the music, for example.
The opening music.
Yes.
For me, it was like in the first scene, I was like, what is this? Yeah. It was different than any episode I've ever heard. That first scene music. I was like, what am I listening to?
Yes. And then when the chief inspector comes to charge Riker with murder, they played this eerie music that was like, just letting you know this is the moment. And so you just realize how well they use music to play with your emotions when you're watching these episodes, or
Mhm.
to signal to the brain, okay, this is when you're supposed to be suspense. Okay, this is where you get to let your guard down. Okay, this is where the action is picking up. And it's just in the background, but it does initiate those kind of responses in your brain, like, okay, I get it. This is the eerie moment. This is the, dun dun dun.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and I liked it, but it was weird. I couldn't place it. It didn't sound like any episode we've heard
The
before.
opening music was different than anything
Hmm.
we've heard before. Almost like a completely different score came
Yeah.
to do this.
And then I
Yes, I
started
agree
thinking,
with
did they
that.
change, musicians or composers, or what's the situation here? Um, Another thing I want to point out very quickly is the writer of this episode, Ed Zuckerman, and please let us know in the comments below. Wasn't that a 90210 character? Andrea Zuckerman. Sounds like that's a person. Um, so I checked to see if he'd done any other episodes because he certainly had a different style of anybody I've watched. And it turns
Mhm.
out, no, this is the only episode of Star Trek he's ever written, but he's got a long, illustrious career in shows like Street Justice, Miami Vice, JAG, The Agency, Law and Order again, Blue Bloods, Law and Order again, Law and Order again. Okay, so we definitely see what this guy's bread and butter. He does these this is why they hired him. They hired him probably
Yeah.
specifically for this episode, or maybe he pitched it and they figured, he's the right guy to write it. I don't know, but clearly he belongs in that world, and they borrowed him for a minute to do that kind of world episode into Star Trek. It was a mystery, kind of.
It makes perfect sense. In my notes, I wrote down murder mystery. I wrote
Mhm.
down murder she wrote / Matlock. I wrote down CSI and Law and Order.
Mhm.
These kinds of formulaic shows that they just superimposed onto Star Trek. So it was obvious to me that this was a Law and Order type of episode, uh, just in Star Trek Starfleet uniform. Um, but it could have been done better, because the science fiction element wasn't fully extrapolated by Mr. Zuckerman. I feel like he could have, he just instead of just using aliens to get the point across that this is a science fiction show, you could actually bring in some arguments, some debates about legalities in these kinds of situations. I think it would make it good for the audience. They could have brought in, for example, the treaty that this planet had with the Federation, and what was negotiated under that treaty, and certain rules of engagement for procedures like this particular incident could have been ironed out. I would have been interested in hearing that debate. I would have
Mhm.
been interested in hearing that argument, where this guy comes in with the team trying to forcefully extract Riker, and this kind of debate about this chess move debate about diplomacy, and whose rights are supersede whose.
Right, right, totally. And it seems like this episode, it really was focused. Like they said, we want to focus on, as the title says, a matter of perspective. We want it to be, the episode was about very specifically one person's memory versus another person's memory versus another person's memory of the same thing, and then how to extrapolate the answer to um, a mystery, which is funny because their testimonials didn't actually lead us to the answer. It was Geordi and Data and Wesley figuring out this anomaly that was going on. That's what solved it. So all these testimonials actually didn't progress the at least not on purpose. Inadvertently, it created that, radiation ray or something like that, which is what led the engineering team to solve the mystery. But,
Yeah.
but that's just luck that happened. Otherwise, if that didn't happen, they would have just said, okay, well, there are three different perspectives, including the assistant who wasn't even there, where they're like, well, she wasn't even there. Yeah, but let's hear what she has to say. And she's like, I bet that this happened. And they're like, okay, that's evidence. I was like, that is scary law right there, dude. You
That's
just
sketchy. Yeah.
somebody that's just like, I'll bet you this is what happened. Your Honor, she said she bets this is what would happen. So
A
I think
friend told her that this is what might have happened if they were there.
she has a gut feeling that that doctor knocked out Riker. Let's
Yeah.
lock that in.
Well, you know, um, given that there was not much depth to the storyline, there were other things that I had to look for, like I said, with the music, with the
Mhm.
performances. And so what I would
And there was no B plot.
no B plot.
I mean, the B
Yeah.
plot was
So
kind of maybe the engineering team working on stuff, but that wasn't. Usually we have, Data's learning how to play pool, or
right.
Troy is teaching Wesley how to not be too much of a dork or something, or, who knows? But we got none of that. They're just like, no, this is so good that we want the whole episode. Anyway, I interrupted you. What were you saying?
No, no, you're right there. And it was like, no, I want something else. The episode in itself opened with an awkward note, right? Because here you have this. It's always weird to have a classroom full
Oh,
of
yeah.
people painting a nude model.
Actually, it did have that. But is that even a B plot? It was one scene. It was just,
No, yeah, no, I wouldn't put that as B plot. I would put it as awkward. It was an awkward moment to me that
hmm.
because when's the last time you've seen that? Do they still even do that where a naked person sitting on a stool with a bunch of fruit around them? Like, is that still done to
I don't
this
know.
day?
I'm picturing Enterprise. Enterprise has done some pretty sketchy stuff, but no, yeah, to your point, not really, no.
Yeah, do you know anybody that's done that? I don't know of anybody that's actually had that life experience and just like, yeah, I was taking this art class and I was drawing this naked person.
I know a
it's a rare.
couple, and I would be
Does it happen like that?
petrified. Yeah. I would not
So
sit there for 4 hours. I don't even know how they
yeah,
can do that without moving.
it's crazy to me, and uh, it's like I don't even know why. Like that seems like an old thing to do. It doesn't seem like a. It's very dated. It's like one of the classical arts type of things. It's part of the old style, I would say, of learning to some degree or another. I don't see it as something that's 400 years ago from now. They're still, doing that. I think that the way art would change, the way art has changed, it's not traditional in that sense anymore.
Right. And I think that demonstrates that Picard does like old stuff. Um, like books. He likes to read books still, like
Shakespeare and
actual
yeah,
books, rather than on
yeah,
his pad. He's an
yeah.
archaeologist. Things like that. Yeah, Shakespeare. So I guess maybe that's just kind of a nod to that. But then when Data just completely destroys him, that was hilarious. He had those nice things to say about the one, nice things to say about the
Yeah.
other. And then the look that he gives Picard when Picard says, oh, and what about mine, Commander Data? You know, go ahead, heap your praise on mine, Commander Data. And then
Yeah.
Data like gives him a look. He's like he was kind of scared to say it, but also like
Yeah.
disgusted by what he saw. And he's like,
Well, he
well,
was actually
okay.
psychoanalyzing him too. It was revealing almost too much about Picard's inner, psyche.
Yeah.
The way
Yeah.
Data was explaining
And then he says, if I can be a further assistant, he's like, no, thank you, Data.
that.
He's like, that's enough. It's going to take me weeks to recover from this.
So, and you know why they write that in there, because that, again, that's another like writer's trope of a matter of perspective, right? Oh, this is literally a matter of perspective.
It's a great point.
You see it that way, I see it this way, you do cubism, I do realism, you're abstract. And so it's the same thing. We're looking at the same thing, but we have this variety of viewpoints in the end when we come with our final artwork. So I get why it was used, particularly for this kind of explanation into the larger A story, which is going to unfold in front of us. This was kind of the intro into it, like, oh, let's see how you look at it. How do you perceive things?
Yeah.
So it makes sense
absolutely.
why they did it. It makes sense why they did it. It just was seeing Picard being uncomfortable and unsure of himself was a moment of fragility that you rarely see from Picard. So I actually like that.
You know, there was something too that I noticed. I think I noticed it for the first time in this episode. So I want to check that out. It has to do with somebody's rank. I feel like somebody's rank changed, or I just noticed it in this episode. So everybody at home, what I'm trying to say is stick around to find out what that is, because I know there's no way you're going to leave. I gotta find out what this one thing Ryan just noticed is. But we will take a very quick break and we'll be right back on the seventh rule. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the seventh rule with Cirroc Lofton.
Hello.
Here are the trivioids of the week. The Enterprise has arrived at Tanaga 4. The away team has completed its survey of Dr. Apgar's work. Ensign Williams' striking style is heavily influenced by geometric constructivism. Lieutenant Wright has effectively fused the incongruities of the surrealists with the irrationality of Dadaism, whatever that is. And Data finds Picard's painting interesting. Data's holodeck recreations will have a nominal 8.7% margin of error. That is gigantic in a court of law.
Yeah.
Dr. Nell Apgar may be one of the great scientific minds in the galaxy, but he does leave things a bit short in other areas. What was that exact quote? I think I changed the quote.
Yeah,
He does come up a bit short in other areas. That's what it was.
Yes.
I was
yes.
like, I cannot believe, but I think that was Riker's recollection, right?
It was.
So what it is maybe he was getting a vibe from her and he's like, she's thinking that this guy can't handle her, but I can, so maybe that, because I was like, that's quite the stretch for someone's wife to be like, oh, he's a great scientific mind, but wink, wink, cuddle, cuddle. He does come up short in other areas. Like 2 minutes after meeting the guy, I'm like, that is savage.
Yeah, like I guess they don't get many visitors around there.
Yeah.
Because she acted like he was the first guy I'd ever seen in like 50 years. So yeah, I thought it was weird. You know what was also weird to me? It was like right when they opened the scene, they said that he was by himself when he died. But then on the recreation, it was all his wife, and they explained that later by saying they went back down to the planet. But initially my brain was like, well, I thought where were they when they blew up, which they explained later. But initially I thought this doesn't line up. This doesn't line up.
Yeah. So I'll tell you, what I noticed on Geordi was he was a lieutenant commander. And remember, in season 1, he was lieutenant junior grade, which is 1.5 pips. Then to start the second season, he had the 2. He was promoted and he became chief engineer. Now he got another half pip, so he's got the 2.5. So he's lieutenant commander. But upon looking it up, he was promoted, it seems, more at the beginning of season 3. So I don't remember if we had noticed that and mentioned it, couple months ago when that
Okay.
promotion happened, but I did zero in on it and I started trying to remember, wait, has he been lieutenant commander this whole season? And I think he has. So that means he is, at the same rank as Data and technically of Troy, but she's not in any kind of command position at the minute. But I believe she is lieutenant commander at this point as well. Worf is lieutenant. Beverly Crusher, if I remember correctly, is actually at the rank of commander, but obviously she doesn't, she's not trying to do any command. The real command she does is when she can pull rank on Picard. She's the only person that can actually pull rank on Picard when he's unfit for duty medically or psychologically or emotionally.
Yeah. And that leads me into what I was going to say about this episode. And that is, this episode frames Picard well. So it paints him in a good light. The humility in the opening scene, the little, his insecurity about being criticized with his art. It's a good thing for me. It shows a little bit of vulnerability.
Yes.
The second part that makes this good is that Picard does things, for example, to instantly take charge of the situation. When he tells this Chief Inspector Cragg, no, it's not going to go how you say it's going to go. It's going to go how I say it's going to go. And we're going to do this. We're going to do this. Data, come here. I need you to meet me. Tell me if we can recreate the conditions. That's a take charge attitude and, actions by Picard. So another good sign that I enjoyed. I like the fact that he showed good judgment when he tells Riker, I can't talk to you right now. I don't think it's a good time. That's just smart, trying to avoid conflict of interest. It's
Yeah.
good decision making. And then
Yeah.
finally, yeah.
No, go ahead. Sorry.
And then finally, within the courtroom scene itself, the things that he did were, which is, kind of like, bring up Riker's testimony 14-31 or whatever it was, and making the legal argument or making the case for Riker's innocence in the way that he did, showed the kind of leadership, showed that he was involved, showed that he was paying attention, that he was problem
Right.
solving. And there was also a very subtle moment where he puts his hands on Riker's shoulder as he gets up to leave in that courtroom scene. And it showed me another kind of friendship. Just a small, subtle thing, but I think it paints Picard in a great light.
Yeah. There was something with there was my favorite moments with Picard were early on, you kind of touched on it. It was when Cragg first showed up, which was kind of a crazy name for him. I'm
Yeah.
Chief Inspector Cragg. It's like I thought he
Yeah.
was going to be called
Yeah.
like Dilly Hilly or something like that, but with a name like Chief Investigator. So
Yeah.
it was when he first comes in and Picard is like, hold on. And then he immediately shows confidence in Riker and says, I got your back, and shows professionalism and leadership when he says quietly, he's like, when Riker was going to go with him and he tells him the way, he's like, number one, wait here. And then he says loudly and authoritatively, says, you have the bridge, right? So it was a nice way of
Mm-hmm.
saying, you got this. I trust you. You're in charge of the whole ship. I have my full confidence in you. And he's also demonstrating it to Cragg. I thought that was a great moment. Also, right after
Mm-hmm.
that, when Picard is talking with Cragg and he says innocent until proved guilty, Cragg says guilty until proved innocent. And they're like, oh, let's argue about it. But then when
Yeah.
he says, basically saying, are you saying that you won't let me take this guy in to custody? And Picard has a great line. He says, I am saying if there is sufficient cause to warrant a trial, I will release my officer into your custody. That is him very politely saying, I'm in charge here. I will follow the rules, but I need to be convinced that this is the correct thing because this is a very drastic measure that is going on here, and I am in charge. And I thought that
Yes.
was well written, well delivered. And then he says, well, what if you suddenly decide to leave? Which is also a great question by Cragg. He could say, what if he proves it? And then Picard just says, all right, so long, suckers, we're out of here. And Picard
Mhm.
says, you have my word as a Starfleet officer. You know, that's also good, but more powerful than anything brilliant. Anyway, I just thought there were a lot of good moments there that let
Yeah,
Picard be in charge, but in a very professional, respectful, and diplomatic way. He's the diplomat of the captains, yeah, in Star Trek.
absolutely. It was well done. I thought it painted Picard in a very nice light. The take charge moments, and even when he gets on the bridge and he announces that this is what's going to go on. We're going to recreate the thing, and then he says
Mhm.
something to the effect of, "I will make my decision based on this reenactment." He announces that publicly, but he's telling Riker like, "Get your story together." Get everything together, and I'm going to make my decision based on what unfolds in this trial. And I think that it just once again showed a lot of leadership to me. It also showed that he he had a reasonable amount of suspicion to be curious to see what the facts were, but he also was being protective of Riker, and taking Riker's word for giving him the benefit of the doubt, let's say. And so I thought that was commendable. I thought it showed good leadership on Picard's point. Like I said, there was a moment during the interrogation, I mean, the reenactment scenes where Picard gets up and he puts his hand on Riker's shoulder.
Yeah.
And it's just a moment to say, don't worry, you'll be all right. I got your back. I'm not being convinced so far what I see. I got some hearsay here. I've got two kind of different versions of events. I thought it was interesting because the first half of Riker's story matched the first half of the wife's story. The dialogue was almost identical. It was just
Yeah.
the emphasis the actors put on the words that changed, but the
And
dialogue was the
the
same.
looks that Riker gave that woman in her memory or reenactment, he
Yes.
just kept leering at her. He was looking
Yes.
up and down. He was like,
Yes.
I wonder if
Uh,
Jonathan Frakes was like, I don't think I got that right. Can we do that take again? Let me,
yeah.
he just like he
Like he
was
was
just
undressing her
yeah.
with his eyes. He was brooding over her. It was dripping wet over the top. Like, I want to take you down right now type of eyes that he was giving. But that was the other thing I took away from this
Yeah.
episode was Riker's close-ups are, he's the close-up king.
Yeah, he is.
Especially when the act ends and they have, dun dun, and then we'll be back after the
He
commercials
does
type
this look.
moments.
He goes like I've often said he acts like a director.
Yeah.
Like in his mind, he's picturing how he needs to act like a director. A director would say, you need to the audience needs to know that your focus is on this guy now. So Riker has like this very deliberate, now I'm looking over here and I can't believe, and now I'm looking back at Captain Picard inquisitively, huh? Like and so I feel like he was born to direct because his acting style is deliberate in a way that I think he's thinking like a director when he's doing it. He's directing the audience on what he thinks we should feel, if that
Yeah,
makes sense.
and the moments he loves the most, I think, are the closing moments of acts when the camera pans in on him and he's stuck
Totally.
in that look, and he gets that moment, that extra 2 seconds, that extra 1 or 2 seconds of just close up time. He eats those moments up he's doing his headshots for the cover of TV Guide.
Totally
Uh,
looks like a soap opera to me
yeah,
when they're like,
exactly.
wait a minute, Janie's back? And then it's just like that reaction
Yeah,
moment. And then they're like,
yeah,
their eyes are telling you the story of all the things that
yeah.
they're feeling now that Janie's back. And we're like, oh my God, Janie's back. That means so many things. And I'm with you. I know what you mean. But yeah, I definitely noticed it in this episode, especially. There was especially one moment where they said something or it was at the beginning when he's like Chief O'Brien was like, the ship exploded. And Riker was like, huh?
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Yes, yes. That was he had two or three of those in this
Yeah.
episode. Just like the end of the scene, long extra pan. Um, so it was it was hilarious. What's up with Counselor Troy always having to see Riker just take down different girls? It's like it's like a torture for me to watch her have to watch it. It's bad enough that it happens, but now it happens like in perpetuity in front of her. It's like I don't know. It's like I'm pulling for the two of them. I know they have this open relationship thing, but I just feel like it's like, bro, you don't have any kind of way to
Maybe
like.
she's rooting for him. Maybe she's like, that's my guy. You nab that girl. This is fun.
I guess it's definitely
Or maybe she's playing a
it's a little
game,
unusual for me.
trying to like in her mind, she's predicting. She's like, now he's going to say, I can do that. And then he goes, I can do that. And she's like, I knew it. Like she's like predicting his moves because she's seen him a million times. She's like, God, you're so predictable, dude.
Yeah, she didn't roll her eyes or anything during the whole like his reenactment of it because that's his version of the events, right? So she was totally cool with everything that she saw in his version. And then she soaked up the other version, the wife's version as well. She wasn't really overreacting to that either. Riker was, he's like, "What do you think? I raped this girl?" Like, and I was surprised they actually even used that word
Yeah.
because it kind of jumped out to me a little bit when I heard it. I was like, "Whoa!" They actually went the rape word.
Star Trek Law and Order, man.
Yeah,
There was also
yeah,
something I noticed that was cool, which is they only used two sets, like two new sets. Very bottle episode. We saw this
yeah,
set behind me at the reactor or the generator, whatever that thing was, the contraption,
yeah,
over and over and over and over again, which obviously works for the plot of the episode. They're reenacting what was going on there. And then the other one was the bedroom. And so
yeah.
that's a great way to save money is to reenact two scenes over and over again. They only need, you
Hmm.
know, basically two walls built with, this generator thing. So that was a very cheap episode to make. And you'll notice they didn't skimp on the makeup. They gave them makeup stuff because they're like, hey, we saved so much money on production
Yeah,
design this week. Go ahead and give them a forehead alien thing. Go make a forehead thing. You've earned it.
yeah. It's funny because no matter what aliens you find, they all dress with the same clothes. Though I've got a suit jacket on. I'm like, oh, okay. So we have aliens that get tailored by the same suit styles that we wear for the last hundreds of years. But that laboratory that they created reminded me of an arcade. It looked like a futuristic arcade.
Oh,
And those little
yeah.
stations there
That's
look
a
like
pinball
where
machine right there.
yeah, exactly. That's where you play video games.
Wow, interesting.
That's what I thought. Yeah.
Maybe that's what
But
they're
then
doing in
when
their off time.
oh yeah, when in the assistance version of events when Dr. Apgar kicks Riker's ass and really just beats him up and Riker's on the floor like you're a dead man. A dead man.
Yes. Yeah, he said it twice. He's like, "You're a dead man, Apgar." A dead man. I was like, "Yeah, that's totally Riker." Oh, I'm convinced that is him through and through. Yep, book him.
it
Book him,
was
Dano.
it was it was so bad that it was over the top as much as you can get. I know he must have had fun in doing this because he gets to do over the top shit in this particular
Yeah.
episode, and overact, which every actor wants a chance to overact. It's like, are you sure you want it? Like, yeah, I'll do it.
Go for it. Yeah.
You're a dead man.
That reminds me, speaking
Uh,
of the acting, I wanted to pull up Mark Margolis, who played the Dr. Nell Apgar, because I recognized him and I didn't know from what. for a moment, the way he spoke, his fashion of speech, the way he would hang on words sometimes reminded me of the EPA agent on Ghostbusters, the guy that was like, and what is the magic word, Dr. Venkman? That guy. And he's like, please, of course. Anyway, and he, may I please
Well,
open the or whatever it is.
he reminded me of the guy who worked for Sosa in the movie Scarface. There was a there was a bodyguard hitman that
Might
worked
it
for.
might be him. When I looked him up, and what I did find, he's not the guy that I was thinking of behind all that
Okay,
makeup, but he is the guy that was in Breaking Bad. Let me see if I can find it. Breaking Bad, he was see if I can where is break? There it is. He was Tio Salamanca. If you remember, if anybody that's seen the series, he was Tio Salamanca in 8 episodes. He was a great, great character, really cool. So that's who he was. But yes, he's been in a ton of things, Cirroc. Very possibly the one you mentioned. Let me see if I
what's his
can.
name?
His name is Mark Margolis, who also, that is also a very recognizable name. He's also in Better Call Saul, playing the same character, Hector Salamanca, for 22 episodes because it's kind of a prequel there, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, he is the dude.
Hmm.
Yeah, he is. He's the dude from Scarface. Yeah,
He's been
he
in
is.
so much
He was
stuff.
in the movie. He was in the movie Scarface. He plays Scarface goes to meet Sosa with his friend, and uh, Sosa gets a phone call in the middle, and he looks over to the guy. The guy's on the phone, but he's telling him, "You got to come here and talk to me." And it's because one of the people next, the guy with Scarface, is a rat, so they have to kill him. So he kills the guy, but he's the main guy in Scarface, like the right hand man of Sosa that is like the killer. So yeah,
Pretty
I did
badass.
recognize him, and I just saw that clip of Scarface yesterday.
No
I just
way.
came to just yesterday. I was thinking to myself, hey, I'd like to watch that scene again where Scarface meets Sosa. I watched that scene yesterday, and then today we're watching him in this. It's so crazy in this episode, but he was
Mhm.
great. I thought he did a good job. He was able to tailor his performances to each different variation, and I felt a different way about him on each take. I
Right.
thought that
From
was good.
Sosa in Scarface to a so-so episode of Next Generation.
Yeah,
But
so
it is
so.
time, maybe you're leading into this next segment, which is the home run of the episode. Who gets the home run of today's episode, Cirroc Lofton?
Oh, yeah, I'm gonna give it to Mark Margolis. I think that he deserves it. Came in as a guest star. He was actually the most believable in a lot of his performance. There was no real hyperbole or exaggeration in his thing. He was pretty straightforward, um, and you could tell that he actually played it with a certain level of like. You could tell that there was revenge or some aspect of him that was pissed off enough to do something. And so, yeah, I think Mark Margolis, the late
Yeah.
actor, passed away in 2023.
Oh, bummer.
He's the one that gets it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I agree with you there. Just because it's not easy to come into a show that you've never worked on and play three different variations of the same character, you know? Don't know if it was difficult for him or if it was fun for him, but whatever it is, I thought he did just a fine job doing it. So
Yeah.
big ups to Mark Margolis and also for being a great actor and having a great career. Rest in peace, Mr. Margolis. That's
Yeah.
pretty cool of him to have such a long and illustrious career.
Yeah.
Also, people that have a long and illustrious career is this long and illustrious list of people. Homer Frizzell, Dr. Anne-Marie Segal, Eve England out in Wales, Yvette Blackmon-Tom, TJ Jackson-Bey out in Missouri,
Yay.
Titus Mohler, Dr. Mohamed Noor, Tierney C. Dieckmann, Anil O. Polat, Joe Balsarotti, Mike Goo, Dr. Stephanie Baker, Carrie Schwent, Faith Howell, Edward Foltz, live from Tokyo, the Matt Boardman, Chris McGee, Justin Weir, Jake Barrett, Henry Unger, Allyson Leach-Heid, Julie Manasfi, Marsha, Classic Schreier, Greg K. Wickstrom out in Hawaii, making us all jealous, Jed Thompson, Dr. Susan V. Gruner, Glenn Iverson, Dave Gregory, Grandpa One, aka Tim Baum. It's his birthday today, by the way.
All right.
And of course, Jason Okun. All right, it's his unbirthday today. All right, everybody, thank you very much for hanging out with us. Stick around. We've got the free-for-all up next. We will be right back on the Seventh Rule. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Seventh Rule with Cirroc Lofton and the free-for-all with Melissa Longo.
Hi.
We've got Jason M. Okun with a cool background as usual. Dr. Mohamed Noor calling in from Duke University. You may have heard of it and him. Eve England is out in Wales, hanging out on non-daylight savings time, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Carrie Schwent is also here. She's got some things to tell us, I bet. Mai is live in Tokyo. Looks like she's going to tell us something about balance or Libra. Justin Weir, Shag, aka Shag 840 is his name.
Hello, everybody.
Allyson Leach-Heid looks like she's wearing a cool shirt by Walking Art made by Melissa. Trailblazer. Chris McGee, he might be wearing a shirt too.
Looks like the emissary.
Yep, it's the emissary.
It's hard to see on this color. Need to get a new one with a different color. Yeah.
Subtle, sophisticated. Speaking of which, the Matt Boardman is here wearing a cool hoodie, also by Walking Art made by Melissa, that you can find at theintrovertedrepublic.com. That's it. Let's get into it. First and foremost, Jake Sisko guesses the IMDb score.
Yeah, I'm gonna say 6-4 Impala.
Nice. Does anybody else have any guesses about this one that doesn't already know?
6-7?
Cirroc, you're probably right in the neighborhood. 6-2, 6-3 is exactly where it probably should be.
5-8.
Oof.
7-6.
I'm not saying that that's what I'd rate it at, but maybe other people are not so high on this episode.
Right. Well, this is the IMDb score.
Yeah.
I actually guessed before I checked. I was thinking 6.5 as well. That's where I put it. However, the answer is Paul Pierce's height, if I remember correctly, 6'7".
Muhammad guessed it right.
Muhammad, yeah, he nailed it right away. Keep a straight face, though. Good work. All right, did we get any some kind of or some sort of? It seems like this would be an episode right before it. I didn't hear one, though.
I didn't hear any.
All right. Justin says nope. Chris says nope. We move on. Melissa Longo, will you please get us started off on the right track and let us know, what did you think about this glorious episode?
Well, for me, this glorious episode was a mixed bag. There's some things that worked for me, some things that I have many questions about. But I thought it was interesting that they started the teaser out with the art class, and it kind of setting up the entire episode in that it was showing every artist's perspective of the same subject matter. And that kind of hit the nail on the head as far as everyone's testimony going into Riker's trial, which also, for me, is a great example of why we need hard evidence when putting people on trial and not just relying on people's testimony as evidence, because it's not evidence, it's just perspective of somebody's relative truth, because truth is subjective to the person who's looking at it. So that's what I got out of it. It did leave me with a lot of questions, and questions that I'll leave for Things Left Unsaid, and you can watch that segment by becoming a patron for the seventh rule. But this question that I'm going to pose to everyone, we can discuss in that segment, is that I was wondering, would other species have practiced marriage, or the idea of marriage, or the institution of marriage like humans do? I mean, it seems like a very human trait or tradition, and I was just wondering, why would aliens practice the same thing? Well, you're mute.
Oh, sorry. That's a good question. Stay tuned for Things Left Unsaid on that. I believe those aliens said they got married right after Christmas, is what those aliens said, on a Tuesday.
On a Tuesday.
Yes. Jason
Before
M.
beheading
Okun
Wednesday.
is here. What do you think of this episode, Jason?
Well, to me, this episode has always kind of seemed more of a filler between everything else that's going on. I guess, if you will, you can look at it as Law and Order Star Trek style. It's more of a, if anything, it's a testament that Star Trek can accommodate many different types of genre. I mean, this is just literally a straight procedural with Star Trek trappings in it. And sort of this Rashomon type approach shows you, obviously, that everybody sees things a little bit differently. And frankly, this is something that could be done almost on any show, and often is on these procedural type shows. So in terms of its originality and uniqueness, perhaps not so much. It's a little middling. I'll leave a lot of the things about the way it was shot for Things Left Unsaid. But in reality, the purpose of the episode certainly is to show us that maybe eyewitness testimony isn't the best one, which is certainly not something that's unique to Star Trek or sort of unique to this episode at all. It's basically okay, and that's really what it is. It doesn't really advance anything. It doesn't show us anything about the characters we didn't know or wanted to see. Frankly, all it does is puts Riker in a not such a good light. There's actually a scene that was not in the finished episode, and I'll talk about it later, that would have made Riker look even worse. So I'll tease with that, and I'll cede the floor.
Wow, you guys are pro teasers now. I'm like, I want to know. Yeah. I want to know. What is it? I got to wait 25 more minutes to find out what this other scene was. Dr. Mohamed Noor, please make the pain go away of waiting and tell us something fun, like what you thought of this episode.
I actually kind of liked it. This is one actually I remember from first run. I remember it being interesting because I remember at the time thinking about this contrast between recall and reconstruction, which are the parts of memory. And, there's a lot that we do reconstruct and we think it's real, but it's not the way it actually happened. But something that was interesting, I actually looked up. I was curious, where does this word Krieger come from for the Krieger waves? Apparently that was the name of the science advisor for seasons 3 and 4 of Star Trek Next Generation. I didn't know that, but apparently that was where that came from. And apparently in some session, he just said, let's call these Krieger waves, and it stuck. But yeah, I thought it was pretty cool, and I enjoyed the episode.
Oh, that's really cool.
So can we be looking forward to some Noor waves?
Right?
Right. I was going to say, we call that the Noor observation.
Yes. You got to slip it in there.
That'd be amazing. I doubt it, but that'd be amazing.
All right. We are now ready for Eve England out in Wales to give us her perspective from somebody on the other side of the country. Your thoughts?
World.
Wait.
Yeah, I think
world. Sorry.
Yeah, world. Similarly to everyone else, I like I think the concept's quite interesting, but it didn't quite work as an episode for me. I thought it was interesting, and when it started, I thought this is quite amusing that they're taking this, idea of Riker being the sex pest, which we've seen for the last few seasons. And I thought at first I thought it was quite funny, but then I just thought that the three different perspectives were too different and too extreme. So that kind of threw me out of it generally. And I thought having Troy there, where she sort of makes that observation about, I don't sense any deception. This is everybody's perspective. When I thought that was problematic from when you were, listening to the wife's perspective, where I think looking at that now, and I think I wonder whether the perspective of people watching it at the time wasn't this, but watching it now, I was thinking, okay, well, this could be problematic when we have an issue generally, I assume it's in the US as well, but in the UK about, rape trials and people not believing women and things. And then you had this perception where basically what Troy said was that Riker and the wife, both believed what they had portrayed in those two different scenes. And I think they were just too extreme for me. I would have liked a bit more nuance to that, because it almost felt like, the way that they were presenting was that actually, they were trying to present this untruthful perception to try and get away from the fact that they were sort of trying to sell the science to somebody else for weapons. So I think that's what threw it for me. I would have liked to have seen more subtlety between the different perspectives, because I thought the concept of that and how they linked it to, that first opener was really clever. And obviously, because I love a bit of Picard bashing, I just love the fact that Data just basically said he was just shit. So that was hilarious.
He was rubbish.
He was rubbish. And Picard was so pissed off. I was like, how dare you? Because you could just tell that he thought Data was going to say his was the best. And that was not happening. And that was just made me laugh out loud. Brilliant.
Do you think Commander Riker would have said, yours is the best, Captain, whereas Data cannot tell a lie?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Carrie Schwent is here, a.k.a. Crafty Bear. What's up, Carrie? What did you think of this particular episode?
A bit of a mixed bag, a little bit hard for me in parts to watch. Not quite as hard as it was watching The Price, but a similar kind of trigger as that one was. There was a particularly not fun hearing during the divorce from He Who Shall Not Be Named that was very similar, and different people who I knew perspectives of different things during that relationship. And I won't go any further in that because that's just too depressing. But there is a few things I do like about the episode. Yeah, the art scene at the beginning, Data is just hysterical. And poor Picard. I read somewhere that there was Jason will have to tell us if they filmed it or if it was just in the script, but I guess there was a spot where after he was supposed to throw some red paint all over on his painting after Data criticized it. I would have liked to have seen that. That would have been a tiny little fun little temper tantrum from Picard that I would have enjoyed, and I have a feeling Eve would have enjoyed seeing him throw paint on it too. And it is pie day, so I've got all kinds of different kinds of pies. And since this episode is season 3, episode 14, I went to 1 minute and 59 seconds in the episode and took a picture of the image from that point in the episode, because I am a bit of a dork and have fully embraced the whole Pi Day thing. And I found out looking at the actor that played Dr. Apgar, in 1998, he was in a movie called Pi. The PI. There's some guy, the paranoid guy, trying to search for some sort of number or something based on the little description on IMDb. I like that actor a lot. He's got such a great voice. There's a couple scenes near the end where I appreciate the effort they went to, but there was one scene where the assistant is swaying just a little bit when she's supposed to be paused. And later on, when Geordi's giving his description, you can see Riker swaying just a tiny, tiny bit. I, of course, enjoy scenes like that. Wes's hair in a scene near the end sort of changes how it's styled partway through the scene. His first line, his hair is all like nice and gelled and everything, and his next 2 lines in that scene, his hair is more like blow dried, like it's sticking up a little bit more, a little softer. But for the limerick for the episode, because this one was hard for me, I just went a little bit more general with it, just from my own perspective of people's perspectives, right? That was probably a mess, but anyway, here we go. People see things from their own point of view, each believing that their side is true, though the search for the truth might not be very smooth, and our intentions can be misconstrued. And yeah, that's all I got.
Great stuff. Thank you very much, Carrie Schwent, aka Crafty Bear. We've got Mai live in Tokyo. What is up, Mai? And please explain this mystery behind you.
Justice. It's about justice, you see. The scales thereof. Two things jump out to me with this episode with my somewhat bizarre brain. First of all, in Data's second officer's log, he mentions that the recreations will have a nominal 8.7% margin of error. And Mohamed will bear me out on this or correct me. That would be considered a bit excessive by many scientists with a 95% confidence level, where you want maybe 4 to 8%. So I was thinking, what? They should have got their numbers right on that one. Data, ramp up that accuracy, sir. The second thing, a little earlier, when Craig says that Riker will be given the opportunity to prove his innocence because under Tenugan law, the accused is guilty until proven innocent, whereas the Federation's own law works on the opposite basis. And I'm sure every American in the audience here felt inwardly proud of the fact that the U.S. is where it's innocent until proven guilty, but I looked that up, and it's not just the U.S. by any measure. In fact, this principle is included in since 1948 is Article 11.1 of the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights. You could say this is a very universal concept, or at least planet-wide, I guess. But there's one notable exception, and that's one with which Sir Patrick in particular would have been familiar. In fact, sorry, Eve, I'm going to have a dig at the Brits for a moment. Current English defamation law puts the burden of proof on the defendant and does not require the plaintiff to prove falsehood. Admittedly, the minimum criteria for a successful claim of defamation were revised and strengthened in 2013, but this law remains even to this day. So a word to the wise, commit your crimes anywhere but Tenuga 4 or merry old England. That's it.
All right. Thank you very much, Mai, live in Tokyo. Justin Weir was taking notes right there, actually. What did you think of this episode?
Ouch. This episode is not a favorite of mine. It doesn't really do it for me. It leaves me with a bad taste in my mouth after I watch it. That's the best I can put it. And watching the different testimonies, like you got Riker's point of view, and then you get the wife's point of view. It hurts inside watching him eyeball her, and then you see her eyeballing him the next time. And when she's like, "And this is how you close the door," I was like, "Oh my God." So, someone already mentioned Dr. Apgar. I love that actor, the bell guy from Breaking Bad. Ding, 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 ding. Yeah, I don't have much to say. I will leave you with my favorite scene, and that's when Picard calls Data into the ready room, and you see Riker just kind of peeking in, like, what's going on? Yeah, nice to see y'all.
Great stuff. Thank you very much, Justin Weir, a.k.a. Shag840. When you see his name, Shag840, that's him in the live chat. Allyson Leach-Heid is here. What is up, Allyson? What do you think of this one?
As Data says, interesting. Not my favorite. I do tend to skip this episode. I also skipped the very similar episode in Voyager.
Which one?
Exofacto.
Oh, Exofacto.
Is it that one? The one where Tom Paris is also accused of murder, and we do this whole thing. There's also a very similar episode in Stargate SG-1. So yeah, I tend to skip all of them because they're all so similar, and I'm like, we rehashed this a lot. Don't need to start over again. So yeah, not my favorite. I love always watching Data, Geordi, and Wesley figure out technical problems together, even if it's only for a little bit of time. So I do, like glam on to those scenes. So loved that. even though Wesley kind of got to help save the day, but it seemed fitting for this one. And we didn't go like into how they worked it out. Picard got to reveal it at the end. And anytime we get a little bit of snarky O'Brien also makes me happy. Telling Riker that, yeah, we are surprised you're here. You could have just exploded. So, those type of things I'm like, I'll take. I'm like, thank you for that. And anytime the hair is so crazy it can distract from the plot line also is pretty cool. I mean, Trina's hair was like she'd been stuck in a wind tunnel with too much spray drying. So that's kind of how I feel about this episode. And Ira apparently also did not particularly like this episode at all. He thought it was the worst one of the season. So I guess I'm not in bad company. So I'll take that.
Here's the episode you were talking about, the Voyager episode. Is this the one?
Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah, that's the one. Also another crazy hair episode.
All right, look at these guys.
Oh yeah, that's the one where she has the dog, right? That
I get those mixed up. I was waiting for the dog in this one. I was like, "Where's the dog?" Oh, different one.
Trying to remember, wasn't there a dog called like Belvedere or something like that in a show? Anyway,
Leghorn, Belvedere, come here, boy.
Chris McGee, the Dark Lord, is here. What is up, Chris? What do you think of this one?
Well, first of all, I love how we're getting all meta with this episode, giving our own unique perspectives on an episode about perspectives. For example, my own perspective is that, contrary to everyone else's point of view, I really enjoy this episode. It's not fantastic, but I think it's a good episode, probably because I'm easily entertained. In this, of course, we get once again a fantastic score by the prolifically good Ron Jones. This is also the second episode in a row where we get featuring a memeable facepalm that we've probably all seen and loved. But to dig into the plot just a little bit here, when Troy said it is the truth, as both of you remember it, it got me thinking. I think it's quite telling, and probably, I'm no psychologist, but I think it might explain how so many disagreements, no matter how small or big, often have each of the two sides believe to their core that they are absolutely correct. Oftentimes, one side has gone to greater lengths to convince themselves that their version is the truth, whether it's to cover their own mistakes, to protect someone or something, or just because they're too proud to admit they're wrong. And as is most likely the case, the objective truth usually falls somewhere in between, perhaps more toward one side, but almost never exactly as that side's testimony claims. As far as my memorable quote of the episode, I'm going to quote Riker, who echoes exactly how I feel every day at 5 o'clock. I'm ready to leave now.
Excellent stuff. Thank you very much for that, Dark Lord, Chris McGee. We've got the Matt Boardman waiting patiently to tell us what we all missed in our discussion. What do you think of this one?
Well, a lot of my thoughts on this episode, everybody else has covered. It always makes me think of the quote, which talks about there's three sides to every story. Your side, their side, and then somewhere in the middle is the truth. And to look it up, and I think it can be attributed to author Sherilyn Kenyon, who said that. And this is one of those episodes that I definitely skip a lot. But especially when I was younger, but as I've gotten older, I kind of don't skip it. Number one, as Chris pointed out, there's a unique Ron Jones score. And I kind of like that there's a mystery wrapped up in like a court case. I don't know. My favorite part of the episode is right at the end when they start stringing everything together and then we actually see this device, what it would have done. And I don't know why I think that's cool. But it's fun. But yeah, overall, not one of my favorite episodes. Although I did think it was interesting to learn that this was one of Ron Moore's first assignments as a Next Generation writer. So this seemed like it would have been a very a very tough assignment to have. But and you know, I have to sympathize with Picard because I have been in that position many times when you when you throw up some art and everybody's like, well, actually I would have done this differently, or you're lighting on this part, and it's like, okay, I'm sorry, I won't do it again. So anyway, that's my feelings on this episode.
Excellent. Jake's final take. Cirroc Lofton, any final thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I heard the word protostar in this episode, protostar cloud. And when I heard protostar, I thought of Prodigy.
Yep.
So shout out to Prodigy is the first mention I think of like the word protostar. I also thought to myself watching this that I guess in the future they don't put cameras as many places as they put cameras in today's world, because they've got cameras everywhere now. You go to the elevator, it's closed circuit TV here, there, wherever. And you would think at a science laboratory, there would be plenty of cameras there to record whatever is going on science-wise. So that just seems like, a misstep for mapping out the future, that you would probably place more cameras in different places. Now, would it catch the proper angle? That could be debated, but I think no evidence at all visually seems a little bit far-fetched for 400 years from now. The other thing that was far-fetched for me was that a lifelong scientist who dedicates his research to the invention of a particular thing would haphazardly throw it away all for like one moment with his wife, like a kiss or a hug or whatever was actually transpired. It just wasn't enough to warrant that. If they were caught in the bed together, maybe, that would probably incite him. But like two clothed adults hugging, like what did you really uncover? I don't think it would be rising to the level of murder for a person who is that intelligent, who is not a gangster or something. This is a regular scientist who dedicates his life to advancing the cause. So I don't see that warranting the reaction that it got. And the other last thing is for me is Riker's character in itself could be viewed through so many different lenses, like how you see it throughout the first 3 seasons so far. Like sometimes it's a little bit too much for me. Sometimes it's overbearing. Sometimes it's appropriate, his charm and flirtatiousness. But I have seen it from all of those angles up until now in these 3 seasons, where sometimes I'm off put by it. Sometimes I think it's right. And so my own perspective of seeing the same guy in so many different scenarios, I have mixed reactions to how I feel about him sometimes. So in that way, I would say that this was an accurate use of a trope on that particular characteristic of Riker and how he behaves. So that's my final take.
All right. Well, this sure was a fun one. I feel like there's way more for me to discuss. At least feels like a few of you have a lot more to say as well. So we'll do that on the other side. But everybody that is not a patron, it's still been great seeing you. Thank you so much for hanging out with us. Thank you to Melissa, Jason, Mai, Carrie, Eve, Dr. Mohamed Noor, Justin, Weir, Allyson Leach-Heid, Chris McGee, Matt Boardman. Thank you all for hanging out with us. For myself, Cirroc, Melissa, and Mr. Aaron Eisenberg, and Walter Koenig, right? We'll see you next time. Thanks for hanging out. We will see you soon on The Seventh Rule.